Hi, everyone. This is your People Behind the Science podcast host, Dr. Marie McNeely, and I'm delighted to have you here with us for episode 856 with our guest, Dr. Tyler Susko. Listeners, we encourage you to visit us at peoplebehindthescience.com to listen to some of our past episodes, find our recommended book list, and more. We hope you'll subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. And we have another excellent conversation on the way from today's guest. So get ready to meet another one of our outstanding people behind the science.
Every day, discoveries are made that will change our understanding of the world around us. Dr. Marie McNeely is here to bring you the brilliant minds who are making these discoveries so they can share their incredible stories and take you on an amazing journey. Welcome to People Behind the Science.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to People Behind the Science. Today, I am thrilled to be speaking with our guest, Dr. Tyler Susko. So, Tyler, welcome to the show today. How are you?
Thanks, Marie. I'm great. It's great to talk to you.
Well, Tyler, thank you for joining us. It's great to reconnect, and I'm excited to chat with you today. And before we get into the details of our conversation, let me just take a moment to tell our listeners a little bit more about you and the steps that you took to get to where you are today. So listeners, Tyler is founder and chief technology officer of Cadence, Inc., a company that creates groundbreaking adaptive solutions. He's also a teaching professor and undergraduate vice chair in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And he's principal engineer and owner of Susko Engineering, LLC. Tyler received his bachelor's degree in integrated business and engineering and his master's degree in mechanical engineering from Lehigh University. Afterwards, Tyler worked as a design engineer for Ingersoll Rand for 2 years before returning to graduate school. He was awarded his PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT. After completing his PhD, Tyler joined the faculty at UC Santa Barbara, and he launched his engineering consulting company. He then later co-founded Cadence in 2022. Cadence has been recognized with an innovation award from the Pacific Coast Business Times, and it was named a finalist for Fast Company's 2025 Innovation by Design Award. And Tyler, today we're excited to get to know you as an engineer, of course, but also as a person. So can you tell us, what do you like to do when you're not working?
That's a loaded question, I think. My hobby, unfortunately, is work, I think, at this point. I generally kind of mend work with hobby. Mm-hmm. As you'd mentioned, I'm the CTO of Cadence, and Cadence is really my baby. We've grown it out of our lab at UCSB. And then I have 3 other little babies that are human babies. And so my life is my hobby, and my hobby is hanging out with the kids, getting them to where they need to go. And we do things like rock climbing and skiing and robotics clubs and all that kind of stuff together. But it's all one thing. They come to work sometimes into the office, and I'm going and doing work when we're with them, and they're having fun with this whole thing too.
I love that. And I think that can be the secret to finding balance sometimes you just have to blend the work and the play, right?
Absolutely. It seems like that's just what it is. And everybody's happy with it.
Well, I think that's wonderful and great to get a window into your life outside of work. But I'd love to talk about your work as well. So how do you describe what you do to someone who's not familiar with Cadence or maybe not familiar with engineering?
I generally just create things that solve real problems for people. So science is kind of one of those vehicles that allows me to get there, a tool that I'd use to do it. But I think I'm a little bit different than the average scientist in the fact that I'm fully driven by translation, meaning taking science outside of a lab and trying to make useful solutions that exist out in the world.
Well, I think that's wonderful. And I'm excited to chat more about your company as we go through our conversation today and more about the work that you're doing. But I think it can be difficult sometimes, particularly launching your own startup and trying to keep everything going every day. So do you have particular quotes or sayings or things that keep you motivated when times get tough?
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach mechanical design and product design, and I have a set of principles that I teach my students. There's like 20 of them in how to design a mechanical product, essentially. And number one on the list is kind of number one in my life. And that first principle is just Occam's razor. Everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. That was an Einstein quote. And I think he cheated on that one because everybody has said this since the beginning of time, William of Occam, where Occam's razor came from. That's pretty much the principle that we use in every facet of life. And when I think about any decision that I make, So you think about the shoe that we've developed, and I know you're familiar with this, Marie, but essentially what it is the boiled down version of a very complex robot. So the very complex robot was useful in teaching us something. Once we learned it, the implementation was to make it as humanly simple as possible. So instead of motors and gearboxes and electronics and control systems, we just have foam and plastic, and that's it. So definitely best quote that has followed me in my career has been everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler.
I think that's wonderful. I think scientists and engineers, maybe as a rule, tend to overcomplicate things. So keeping that in mind can help.
You wouldn't believe, especially the younger kids, right, when they're getting started. So I've taught over the years over 1,000 engineering students now. And the first solution is always to go as complex as possible. And we do these design reviews every quarter with them where we try to look at what they're doing and help them progress. And it's shocking how much value you can get out of just thinking, well, how can I do that thing you're doing, but simpler, with less parts, with less reliance on any type of complexity. And generally, what I always tell my students is that simple wins. If you have something that's complex and something that's simpler and they're doing roughly the same thing, the thing that's simpler wins, even if it's not doing as well as the complex thing. And that's because if it's simple, cost can be maybe 1/10 of what the complex thing is. Usability is easier because you don't have to learn a manual to work it. A good example of that is I see a lot of progress and I am a roboticist. That's where I started. My PhD is in robotics, but I've grown to just use robotics as a tool and not really the end solution to anything because all of this complexity just starts to build. And I can give you examples like things that are in a clinic. There's a local hospital that we have here in Santa Barbara, and I work closely and I'm friends with the physical therapist there because that's what our product really does. And they have this brilliant, beautifully designed exoskeleton there. And it was the talk of the town. I remember going to fundraisers and they'd bring this thing out and it was so cool. And you could put somebody with a spinal cord injury and they would walk and it was amazing. Completely paralyzed, you can walk. And that's awesome. So I talked to the therapist 5 years later down the line and I'm like, how's that going? And he's like, we don't use it anymore.
Oh, no.
What do you mean you don't use it? It's a $500,000 machine. It's awesome. And he's like, it just breaks. And then when it breaks, then I don't know what's the problem. And I'm a physical therapist, not an engineer. So I don't know how to fix this.
Right.
So then I have to wait for a technician to get here. And by the time they get here and fix it and it's back up and running, something else is wrong with it. And you're like, oh my God. So that's just one practical example of where complexity really has its faults.
Well, that makes sense. And it sounds like, Tyler, you've had some wonderful opportunities to mentor students. And I think mentorship can be so powerful in science and engineering. So can you talk a little bit about some of your own mentors and role models and people who maybe helped shape your career?
Oh, absolutely. So when you go to grad school, you really are at the mercy of your advisor. I always tell that to students too, as they're going to do their PhD. I think the advisor is the most important part of grad school. It's not necessarily the school you go to, it's that advisor. So of course, if I think about mentors in my life, my advisor, Hugo Krebs, he was one of, or if not the founder of the field of rehab robotics where I was. He had started his PhD in the 1980s where he was building this robot that would interface with stroke patients. And it was like a joystick kind of thing. And in that work, he learned so much over a 30, 40-year-old period. And just having somebody like that be your advisor was so good. And he did things so right. I've had a lot of bosses. I worked in industry before I went back to grad school and I had wonderful bosses and then I had really awful bosses. And it's similar like that as in grad school as well. And my advisor, Hugo Krebs, he still supports me to this day, which is amazing. It's almost like a second father figure at this point. But I've had great bosses in the past. And generally, I think a good mentor, a good boss is somebody who's just very invested in your success. I remember in industry, I had this one boss, Warren Scythe, his name was, and he would just make success so fun. Like if I did something well at work or I was designing power tools at the time and I came up to him and I'm like, my power tool that I just designed, I just tested for the first time and it's the most powerful power tool. It was an impact wrench in the world. Like we just beat the pants off everybody. He was just so happy. And we ended up going out for a beer after or something like that. And those are the types of mentors you want. And also people that are hard on you early and then get better with time. And that's what Ego was too at MIT, that we had many stern talks at the beginning as things weren't going well. Just coming back from industry, forgetting calculus for a couple of years was a little hard.
Right.
And then being thrust into MIT, I was like, okay. We had some stern talks there, like you're either going to sink or you're going to swim. And eventually, once I got past that and passed the qualifying exams and all that kind of stuff, he became my best proponent. Before that, he was not. And I think that that was really important.
Definitely. I think you have to have a little bit of tough love sometimes to learn those important lessons and kind of force you to do your homework, right?
Yes. And you got to either push harder or leave.
That's right. Well, let's talk more about your journey. It sounds like you started with this interest in robotics. Can you maybe take us back to the beginning before your PhD even and talk about where this interest in science and engineering began?
I think as most sciencey people or mathy people, they're just good at math as a kid. At least that was for me. I do know some people where that's not the case, but as a child, math just came easy and it was fun. And I still get mental satisfaction by doing math. Like my son's in 7th grade now and he's doing algebra and things like that. And I really get a lot of enjoyment out of even just basic math. It's fun. I can remember going to church and my mom handing me an envelope and giving me long division problems on it. Because as a kid, you're bored out of your mind in church. And I would just sit there and she'd give me like 20 digits to work through because I would be bored. And that's always just been the way that I was. And then you figure out when you go to college, well, what do I do with this? And engineering seemed like a good play at that point. It was something that I liked, Connects and Legos and things like that. And in college, it was nice because if your brain is kind of tilted in this way where it's like math comes more or less easy to you, engineering school was really fun for me. I loved all the problems that I could solve, and that was all great. Like in high school, I think it was harder when I had to take things like, as you mentioned, you're very good with languages. I was not. Spanish was hard for me, and history was hard for me, and English was hard for me, but math was like fun. It was just always easy. So engineering school was a breeze. It was fun. And then so while I was in college, I got this opportunity to engage with people with disabilities through a program called Best Buddies. And that was a really nice defining moment in my life where I work with people and just realized that certain people have special needs that may not always be met. So that's kind of this thread in my career that has really continued through the robotic stuff. When I went to MIT, I went there because they were doing robots for rehabilitation for people with neurological injury. So I was like, this is really cool. I could affect a community that was underserved while also learning about robots. That sounded like a win-win. So that kind of set the groundwork for what I've done in my whole career. And then after the PhD, kept on going that direction. And then we founded Cadence, which obviously is the company that just follows that same line.
Definitely. And I have to ask, I think for a lot of people, what to do next after finishing their bachelor's degree or master's degree is often a big decision. You decided to go into industry. What were some of the factors that you were weighing when you were making that decision?
I'm a very odd science person, so I never considered grad school. I did a master's right after undergraduate, primarily just because I got a scholarship for it. So there was a program at the school I went to, which was Lehigh, where if you got a certain GPA, they give you a fifth year for free. And at that point, I was like, oh, sweet. I'll just stay here and take a fifth year and I'll do a master's. That's fine. So I did a master's just primarily because it was free. And I often tell my students that wasn't a good choice. I think that I didn't really value it very much. I felt like it was just another year of college. I didn't have focus in that year. I thought it was kind of a waste for me. And I never had intentions of going back to school, but I loved teaching and I really loved doing the math. And when you get out into industry and you're designing a product, you might be doing a little bit of math, but not a ton. So I started teaching physics at night when I took my first job. So I took my first job because I had a master's. This was in 2008 and the housing market just crashed. The stock market just crashed. And because that, I was living in Augusta, Georgia. My first job was at a company called Club Car. We designed all-terrain vehicles and golf carts and things like that. So I was there and I really missed school. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to email the college and say, I'll teach anything. I'll teach economics. I'll teach calculus. I'll teach physics. If you have any openings, I'll teach. And they just wrote me back the next day and said, oh, great. Because the housing market's crashing, our enrollment at Augusta State University, which was a small state school that was just in Augusta, Georgia, their enrollment just jumped because everybody was going back to a small state college from private universities because finances were not abundant at the time. So their enrollment jumped and they're like, we need somebody to teach physics next week. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So
wow.
I was working during the day as an engineer. And then at night, I taught physics and the associated lab for non-physics majors. So that was an interesting challenge for me too, because it was not math people, but it was bringing it back to, okay, let's think about how we can integrate math into physics. And it was a whole lot of fun. So in that job, I was like, okay, I liked industry just because I thought, well, this is what you do as an engineer. But corporate really wasn't me. So I knew that the corporate thing wasn't going to last very long at that point. But I did enjoy product development. So I spent 2 years getting really good at product development and things that engineers do, like CAD and testing things. And I really got a good fundamental basis from industry that then when I went to do a PhD 2 years later, the math had left me.
Right.
Not having done calculus in a couple of years, you forget how to do integration by parts or something like that. And you're like, oh gosh, there's a lot to memorize in math that you will forget if you don't use it. But when I got to MIT, it did come back to me. It just took like a quarter for that to happen. But I thought, and I tell all my students this, the time in industry, I learned more in that 2 years in industry than I would have learned if I went straight to grad school. So then going to grad school, I was just more a mature student. I think I started grad school at 25, finished master's at 23, worked for 2 years. And then when I went back, it was just, oh boy, I'm head and shoulders above people in designing things because I did this professionally. So I did it every day. And so while my PhD wasn't in design, I had never taken a robotics course before I got to MIT, which was a shocking reality. I had to drop the course. This is why I got stern talking to when I got there. They had put me in like some advanced controls class, which is like a robotics class. But I never took the basic controls class. I had no clue. It was like taking Spanish 5 when you never took Spanish 1. So you get there and you're like, I don't know what language you're talking. Controls is a very obscure field. There's all these terms and diagrams that are used. They're called like root locus or Bode diagrams. I never heard those words before. And they're talking about them day one. Like everyone knows this. I had no clue what they were saying. So I'm in the library trying to figure this stuff out and I'm reading like undergraduate or basic books and there's no way. So I had to drop that, which is why I got a stern talking to. But I went back and I just audited the undergrad class instead. And then I went and audited neuroscience because I had no clue what I was doing in designing something for people with brain injury. So I better learn neuroscience to start. So it was a rocky start to grad school. And I think that's the challenge of going to industry to start. Is you go to industry, you're going to lose some of that academic momentum, but you get kind of a superpower in something else and you learn how the world works, which I think is really helpful.
Definitely. And so let's talk about then how you decided to found Cadence.
I've always been enamored with startups since I was young. Even in college, I took an undergraduate in business and engineering because I always thought it was a really cool intersection, but I was so mathy that engineering is kind of my thing. And business, I don't think I'm very good at it, but I understand it a little bit. So This was my third attempt at a startup. First one was crash and burn completely. I wasted a good 4 years on that one. Second one is still limping, I would say, limping along slowly. I'm completely uninvolved with it at this time, but Cadence is doing really well. I think the reason and what was so exciting about founding Cadence was it was 100% in my area. Other companies that I had started relied a little bit on mechanical engineering, but that was something that any mechanical engineer could do. These other couple companies, this one, there wasn't anybody that had the experience that I had building this very specific gait robot for physical therapy. And I got that through the PhD. It was 5 years doing something no one else in the world was doing. And then I had learnings from that no one else in the world had. So that really started to set apart Cadence when we started to think about this very simple and practical solution of a variable friction shoe. It came from this knowledge that no one else had. So that really set us apart. And it also gives us a little bit of credibility, and we can do things that are crossed between university research and industry at this point that I wouldn't have been able to do with these other companies because they were just kind of generic design, mechanical stuff.
Well, that makes sense. And we've mentioned Cadence a couple of times and sort of hinted that it's a shoe, but can you maybe describe the product in a little more detail?
I'll give you a little bit of a lineage on how this came to be and what it is. So in my PhD at MIT, I was designing rehabilitation robotics specifically for locomotion, for walking. The typical problem that we see after a neuro injury is foot drop or the inability to clear the floor when someone tries to take a step. So the robotic system that I developed at MIT, it was a machine vision system that looked at the knee and the hip joint via some infrared markers. So I had cameras with an infrared filter on it, so it could only see these markers that were moving in space. And based on those markers moving in space, the machine could estimate the position of the foot. So when the foot moved all the way back where it was ready to take another step, we call that terminal stance, where we're about to push off for that next step. As soon as that push off happened, the machine would drop the floor on the side of the foot that was about to swing forward. That's called the swing phase of gait. And when it dropped the floor, that foot that normally would have difficulty getting forward was able to just swing forward like a pendulum. And then when it gets to the front and it's about to heel strike again and grab the ground, the treadmill track would come up and meet the foot again and bring it back for another step. And this would happen over and over again. And the machine was doing this at the cadence of their walking. So however fast they're walking, the machine is just watching them and it's responding. So that was really my PhD work. We had another couple of modes on that I won't describe because it'll be boring. But based on that, we did 40 sessions with 3 people with brain injury. And one of the things we found, it was really just an exploration of physical therapy with a robot. And the thing that we found that I was alluding to earlier was that just not having this floor constraint made it so easy for people to walk. The cognitive load went down. If you have foot drop or a stiff leg or something that makes it difficult to get your foot forward, you have to invent some strategy to move your foot forward. So a lot of people, what they do is they pull it around to the side. It's called circumduction. Other people will hip vault, or they kind of like throw that leg forward. All of these are energetically taxing, difficult movements, maybe more prone to falling and injuring yourself. But without the floor there, you don't have that obstacle anymore. But of course, you need that obstacle to
walk, yeah,
grab the ground. Yeah, exactly. And to get your friction back to move. And that obstacle exists everywhere else in the world. So then the question, once I moved from MIT to UCSB, that was in 2015. When I'm moving there, one of the people that was in my study said, it's just so easy to walk on that thing. I wish I could bring it with me when I left the lab. And I started to think to myself, well, we can do that. So I told her that and she's like, okay. And so we started working together. I moved to Santa Barbara. She was moving to Santa Barbara, which is just this weird coincidence. So I said, why don't we try? So we tried. The first year was a robotic shoe because we came from robotics. But as I've learned in my career, simplicity is better. So robotic shoes are heavy. They're complex. They're susceptible to the elements and rain and water and all those kind of things. So after the first year of realizing a robotic shoe was not a good idea for all these reasons, we started to pivot into doing something passive. So we did one that was like a platform that moved in on the shoe as people grabbed the ground. And that was super dangerous. The student team and I worked together on that one for a year and just realized on test 1 that this is too dangerous. So we dumped it. And then it was off to the races. One of those students wanted to do a master's. She did a master's with me. And we got a little team together. We made about 40 different pairs of shoes and then found this variable friction thing that seemed to work really well. So the way variable friction works, it's just if someone is swinging their foot forward, remember that period when it's difficult to get the foot forward because you have foot drop, we have a low friction surface. But as soon as they put their weight on it, they get high friction. So it replicates what the MIT Skywalker project was doing by removing the constraint completely. We can approximate that by reducing the coefficient of friction to 1/10 of what it would have been in a normal shoe during that period of walking. So we don't get it to 0, but we get to 1/10. And then as soon as they put their weight on it, they get their full traction back.
Well, I think that is so exciting. And it sounds like things are going really well there. Can you maybe talk about where the company is today and what you're most excited about at the moment?
Absolutely. So it's been so much fun. We started off and it was just me. And then it was me and a chairman who came on that understood business much better than I did. Then we pulled in a CEO who was fantastic. He knew exactly what he was doing. So that was fantastic. From a business side, he's wonderful. And now we're up to 10 people. So 10 people working the company. This year, I think we will have sold 35,000 pairs of shoes. So when I also think about simplicity, it also allows you to have impact as a scientist, if you think about it. If I were to continue down the robotic pathway, the most successful robotic gait machine out there is called the Hokoma Lokomat. And to my understanding, and I may be wrong here, but I think there's about 250 of them installed in hospitals worldwide. And you think about patient access to something like that robot. People might be able to use it once a week at best, if that's the case for a certain number of weeks, and that's it. And the efficacy of it is still up in the air. Or you can make a $200 shoe and affect 35,000 people in less than 2 years, and they can have it and they can use it every single day. I just put together a course to teach physical therapists how to use this as a therapy tool, which really was what it was meant for. But 99% of people wear it as an assistive device, just something that makes it easier to walk. So with this simple device, economics are in your favor. It's not a $500,000 robot. It's a $200 shoe. So you can wear this shoe. You can have it every single day. we know that the volume of physical therapy correlates to outcomes. So because you have it every single day, if you could follow a program and do your therapy every single day with it, the outcome can be much greater for a much lower cost.
Well, I think that is remarkable. And we hinted at just some of the challenges. And I know there's no shortage of challenges when you're in a startup or you're just in science in general. So I love talking about some of these struggles and challenges so people can kind of get a realistic sense of what life is like in this role. So Tyler, do you have an example of maybe your favorite failure or your favorite struggle? And could you walk us through how you got through that tough time?
Yeah, there've been a lot. So going back to PhD, of course, I mentioned how it was difficult coming back and not remembering any calculus, but I had failed the quals at MIT the first time. So in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at MIT, the qualifying exam is quite challenging. You have to pick 3 different subjects. And in those 3 subjects, you have to take a written test, but also an oral test. That was scary. The first time I passed the written ones, the oral, I just was like a deer in headlights, shut down. So the nerves got me. And the test was so like, you're looking at these people who I realized over time at MIT that there weren't that many geniuses. So yes, they exist, but it was a very small minority. And over time, I realized that the first time looking out at this sea of professors, because you're doing it in front of like 7 professors and they give you a problem, you get 20 minutes and then you have to go to the board and solve it. I'm there. I'm like, I kind of get it. And there was this first problem I go there and I just blanked and they're asking me questions and it was like a multi-part question. I'm just sitting there looking at these people and my brain just froze.
Oh, goodness.
I couldn't get past the first part of it. And they looked at me like, okay. And I'm like, I was like, that was it. Fail.
Right.
So my advisor had sat me down and I mentioned he was hard early and awesome later, which I thought was great. So he sat me down and he's just like, you failed. What do you want to do? Because it was up to the advisor to tell you your results. And I was like, well, I'm going to try again. So you get 2 chances. If you fail twice, you get kicked out.
Oh, goodness.
That's how it works. So the attrition rate's actually quite high. I have multiple friends that got cut because they failed twice. So the next time, the way that I had passed, I just didn't study.
Really?
The first time I was so in my head that I had every equation trying to just keep it all in my brain. And I'd studied this sheet and I was so tense that I got up there and just froze. So the next time I reviewed the notes, but I wasn't crushing myself. And I made sure that I got a good night's sleep the night before. The first time I was panicking. I remember my wife, we were laying in bed and she's like rubbing my back because I was freaking out the night before. But the second time I just let it go, it was easy. And then I went in there and I just was like, I got this. I can do it. And confidence is so important. I tell that to my students too when they public speak is people are terrified of public speaking. If you can convince yourself you're really good at it, you win. You will be really good. The audience will see that confidence and then your speech will be great. And I also tell them you can't fake it. You actually have to be great. So in order to be great, all you got to do is practice. So if you practice a bunch of times, you know what you're going to say. You never think about verbatim. The second you think about, I'm going to know this verbatim of what I'm going to say, absolutely, you stumble all over yourself and you fail. So I guess my takeaway from that was you just have to have confidence and be calm and go in there and say, you know what? You're no better than me. I'm going to do this. So that's how I got through it. But the first one was pretty devastating. Like, what am I going to do? You spent 1.5 years there before you take the quals and you take the qualifying exam. And I'm like, boy, I'm just going to waste 2 years of my life if I fail this the second time. And that sucks because you walk away with nothing at that point. But I was like, all right, I'm just going to go in there, be confident, and I'm going to crush it. So that was probably the most challenging part in my life.
Well, I think that is an important lesson. And just like you said, staying calm, making sure you take care of yourself, and just so that you can focus during that critical moment. Because I think what you did is what so many other students do, where you just sort of panic.
Absolutely. I think it's a fight or flight thing. Like, you know neuroscience better than me, but there's something going on there where your brain goes into a mode where it's in this protective mode.
You can't think logically. Yeah,
dangers or something, right? And you're not able to perform. This happens with people in the Olympics have the yips and things like this, where Simone Biles was an example, right? I think the nerves got to her. And while she was the best, she couldn't do it. And I think that she shed a lot of light on that.
Absolutely. Well, I am glad that you made it through that second time. And it sounds like things went a little bit better, more smoothly in graduate school from that point going forward. And I think since then, you've had so many successes. And we love to take a moment to celebrate some of these successes in science on our show, because I think oftentimes things are so chaotic, so busy that you don't take a moment to celebrate. So do you have a favorite success story that you'd like to share with us, Tyler?
I don't even think about success. I don't feel like I'm successful yet. And maybe that's a weird thing, but I haven't ever really stopped to smell the roses yet. I guess graduating, passing the qualifying exam was probably the biggest feeling of success and relief. So after all that passed and I passed the second time, my advisor brought me in his office and he said, okay, well, whatever you did worked. He said, you scored second best out of 80 people. And I was like,
oh, wow,
okay. I went from failing to doing good. So there it was like, all right. And at that point, I got this sense, and this is what the MIT community always says, you'll never be smarter than the day you pass quals because you've kind of studied for it and you feel like kind of invincible at that point. And you're like, you know what? I can handle hard things. So I think that moment really shaped the rest of my life because anytime I get into a pickle now, or I feel like a problem is too hard, I just have to go, no, I can figure out whatever.
Yeah.
So I kind of look back at that. Yeah. And I think that there's a book that I had read, and I'm forgetting the title right now, but it was about doing hard things. And the author had said they do one hard thing a year that's like they have a 50% chance of actually being able to do, whether it's running a 200-mile race or paddling across a 26-mile channel of water or something like this, that they think that there's a good chance they're going to fail. But when you complete something where there's a really good chance that you can fail, you do get a sense of confidence that, wait a second, I've had the rug pulled out from under me before. Now I can stand up again. I'm good. So I think, I don't know, other than that, graduating wasn't as big a deal as passing quals. Once you pass quals, then you just got to finish a research project. So it was cool passing, but I always had this feeling, this is just the start. I haven't done anything yet. I still feel that way. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I've been a professor for 10 years and Cadence is doing really well right now, but I always feel there's this danger that a lot of businesses fail. So I don't feel like a success yet.
That's right. I think you're being modest, Tyler, but I think this is something that a lot of scientists struggle with. You just sort of have that imposter syndrome and this sense of danger never quite goes away. That's something that I hear a lot from folks as well. You're not alone.
Yeah, it's kind of the journey, right? You're on this journey. Sometimes you think good versus bad and you don't even know what that is anymore because you think, well, this could be good, but there's repercussions of it. Or if you think something's bad, for example, I've told you about these other startups that failed. We got crushed on the second one by a patent infringement lawsuit. And we had just launched this product on Indiegogo and we were like, oh, this is going to be great. And it was going really well. And the sales were great. And we thought we were clear. We had a patent attorney look at the space and said, you're clear to go. You're good. And then we got the cease and desist and it was like this gray area and all this stuff kind of like topples down, right? You've like built this thing. You've spent years on it. You've invested all of your savings into it and it just implodes. And so I've had that experience before. So I don't count on anything. In business, it's a little bit different than science because business is cutthroat. If you're going to encroach on somebody's space that they want to keep and they've got a means of protecting it, they're going to come after you. There's so many landmines in business that don't exist maybe in science. If we're writing papers or whatever, I'm sure that there's political things that are getting in the way, but it's really life or death. It seems a lot in business.
I think the academic environment can be a little bit more civil.
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, you mentioned a book and this kind of idea of doing something hard every year. We love talking to all of our guests to learn more about what they've been reading and if there's particular books that they can recommend for all of us who are trying to continue learning and expanding our own thoughts. So do you have a favorite book or one that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend for us?
My very favorite book I read a few years ago, and it was called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. I'm not sure if you've ever read this, and it seems like it's just because I'm in shoes that it was interesting, but that's not it. It was just a really awesome story. So Phil Knight was, I think he was in Stanford graduate school, if I'm remembering correctly. And he did a project for like a business class that they had to do some marketing project. And his thesis was, I want to make shoes in Japan. So Japan was starting to be the superpower in manufacturing for cameras and things like that. And so he said, okay, well, I want to make shoes there. And so he took a flight around the world and had this amazing experience. And, you know, it was all this business stuff of him working with somebody who then stabs him in the back, who then he works and he's selling shoes out of his back of his trunk, like figuring it out. And then all of a sudden he gets the leverage and starts to develop this company and all these things that happened in the life of Nike, which is an inspirational company. So when that book was over, I listened to it on audiobook. I was actually sad. Oh, and I remember the title of the last one I was talking about. It's called The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter.
Okay.
I think Shoe Dog was more entertaining, but the Comfort Crisis was just about doing these things that were really hard in which you could fail.
I like it. Well, we will add both of these books, Shoe Dog and The Comfort Crisis, to our list on our website for our listeners to find. And one of the things that we haven't yet touched on, Tyler, in terms of your career experiences are some of the opportunities you've had to travel. I think in science, oftentimes you get to go places, to go to conferences, to share your work and to work with collaborators. So do you have a favorite place that your science or your work has taken you?
Well, the only really interesting place I went to was Sao Paulo, Brazil. Have you been to Brazil?
I have not.
It was definitely different culture. The language was Portuguese, which I speak none of. So just getting into a cab and pointing to things is not what we got around. It was a little bit different. But with that said, I'm not a great traveler. Don't love it. Other people love travel. It's just not my thing.
So what was the occasion for going to Sao Paulo?
Oh, it was a conference on rehab robotics.
Okay.
My advisor actually organized it. He was from Brazil. He organized it at his home university that he attended during undergraduate and brought a lot of people there. It was called Biorobotics. And yeah, I presented my work there as a grad student, but ultimately, I'm just not a great traveler.
Did you get to do a little bit of sightseeing while you were there or mostly stay at the conference?
I always mostly stay at the conference. We went to a really good Brazilian steakhouse, which is kind of their thing, where they bring out these cuts of meat. They exist in the United States too. We did that. That was the most exciting thing we did in Brazil, though.
And you made it back safely, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're safe and sound.
No incidents.
Well, my debit card somehow got stolen, which was weird.
Oh, no.
That's why I don't like traveling very much.
Yeah, I was going to say, reinforcing the dislike of travel when these bad things happen on like the one big trip you've taken.
Yeah, I just started noticing, I was like, who's spending on this? And it was weird because I didn't even use the debit card down there. So I didn't know how, like it was still in my wallet. I didn't know how it got taken in some way. I have no clue.
Well, I'm glad you survived the trip. And it sounds like it was at least an experience to grow, meet people from around the world at this conference.
Yeah, for sure. The nice thing about being in any university is that you meet everyone from all the different cultures. My lab at MIT was, I would say like 60% Korean. I think there was a time where I was the only American in my lab and there was probably 10 people. So people from Italy, Greece, Korea. So that was quite multicultural. And then at university, at UCSB, where I teach now, there's so much opportunity to meet people from different countries.
Certainly. And I think the people that you get to meet and that you get to work with over the years is part of what makes the career wonderful. And I think there are still stereotypes out there about particularly for perhaps what engineers are like or what scientists are like. And we try to break some of those stereotypes by just showcasing this human side of the endeavor, whether it's quirky traditions or just funny memories. So do you have an example, Tyler, that you can share with us that maybe goes against some of the stereotypes people may still have?
Not as many as you might think, but there's a couple little stories that would come to mind. So we would play with the robots a little bit in the lab I was at MIT, where we would play Iron Man with them and I have a picture of myself. I think it's on the Cadence website of myself and two ankle robots that were used for physical therapy, and we were testing them over ground. So I look like the absolute most ridiculous person wearing these things. But another memory that comes to mind, we had little lab parties and one day, because one of the members was Greek, Ego, my advisor, brought in a box of plates. It was so funny. It was so awkward. We kind of I don't even remember what it was for. I think he was having a baby. So I'll start just breaking these plates in a random room at MIT. And then we look at each other like, nobody's got a broom.
Oh, no.
We didn't think this through. But yeah, not too many stories.
Oh, I love that. And I think just having those human moments where you get to explore each other's cultures and just interact with people as people, not just coworkers and colleagues, I think are really meaningful. And I think as scientists, you're working to solve difficult problems and you're, as an engineer, working to create important solutions that the world needs. So if we were to take away the barriers that normally hold you back, Tyler, whether it's funding, staff, technology, just time, feasibility, whatever the case may be, what is the one problem that you would most want to solve or the question that you would most want to answer?
I'm a semi-germaphobe. I wouldn't say crazy, but on an airplane, I'll put on a mask. That's like my level. So I would love to work on, and I've thought about this actually, and I know nothing about it, but I would love to figure out a cure from the common cold. That would be awesome. If you have a bacterial infection, you go and you get an antibiotic, and in a day, you're better. It's amazing. But with a cold or COVID, for me, that's 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks, and you're just miserable. And that's just my immune system, I guess. There's a steep penalty for me for getting a cold. And with 3 kids, I get a ton of them. So if I could just figure out something you could take that would destroy a virus or get you through it in a day, that would be it. Absolutely. 100%.
Well, Tyler, I have to second this. I'm 1 week into a cold right now, and I am wishing there was a better solution.
Right? It's so annoying. There's some things you could take for COVID, which they never gave me because I think I was too young or something. But I never could get anything. And you're just like dying there for 2 weeks. Your brain's gone for 5 days. You're like, okay, we figured out bacteria pretty well. Let's do something for viruses. Take a little zinc, or there's cold medicine that makes you all groggy and all this stuff. Like, no, I want to kill the virus. And I don't know enough about viruses. And I know it's probably an extremely hard problem. But your question said if feasibility was a problem, that's what I do.
I love it. Well, thank you for dreaming big with us today, Tyler. And I know we've covered a lot of ground in our conversation and talked about a lot of different aspects of your career, but we love to end by talking about advice. So for our listeners out there who may be at various stages of their own careers, what advice did somebody give you at some point that really helped you that you can share with them?
I think we'll go back to the book that we had talked about doing hard things. So in my situation, I applied to grad schools after working for a couple of years, and I had the option to go to MIT, or I got into UC Davis, and I got into Carnegie Mellon. Those were really my three options that I had to pick from. So I went and toured all of them. And when I went to UC Davis, the atmosphere was really great. I'd never been to California before, so flew out there and met with the students. They did this like visitation day, and students were happy. They were like, oh yeah, qualifying exam. Yeah, it's no big deal. Everybody passes and it's cool. And I said, what do you do on weekends? They're like, oh, sometimes we'll get together with other grad students. We'll go on hikes, and where the biking is really great here. And it's just beautiful and life is good. And then I took a red eye that night because it was the same visitation weekend at MIT. And I go there. I was sitting at coffee hour with the other graduate students. And I'm like, so how's life here? They're, what do you mean? Like, well, what do you do for fun? I don't know what you're talking about. I love what I do. I would work. And I was like, okay. And like, oh, one time, like last month, I went to Boston or something. There was a wonderful person at MIT named Leslie Reagan. And she was there for such a long time. She was the person who kind of oversaw the graduate program. And she had a speech that was apparently famous. You were on a bus and they took you to lunch or something, and they were taking you around Boston one day as they were showing you around on this visitation weekend. And she gets in the middle of the bus. She's like, hey, listen, just letting you know what this is. This is the Navy SEALs of the academic world. If that's not what you're looking for, you shouldn't come here. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. This kind of tracks with what the grad students are telling me. And then I went to Carnegie Mellon, and it was kind of a blend between the two. But at that time, I'm talking to my family, asking about advice. And my dad says to me, you have to go to MIT. And I'm like, well, it'd be really cool to go to California. And the life looks really fun there. And I was dating my wife at the time. And my wife was like, cool. And I'm just like, I don't know. So the advice I got from him, and I reached out to other people that were writing me letters of recommendation. I'm like, what do you guys think? Like, I really want to go to Davis. It's going to be pretty cool. And this is going to be the most outrageous experience if you do MIT. And so I did it. So the advice that I said that I'd pass on was, while you're young, if you're able to, do the hardest thing you possibly can, because it pays dividends later. I would have probably had a much more fun time at other schools, but it gave me things that have just been so valuable for the rest of my life. Like we talked about in this podcast, which was, if there's a hard problem, I'm pretty sure I can do it.
Definitely. Well, I think that is a wonderful story and excellent advice, Tyler. Is there any other last piece of advice or a last note of inspiration that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Follow your passion, whatever it is that you think that you want to do in life. I get a lot of questions from students about, should I go to grad school? Should I go to industry? What should I do? It's ultimately, who are you? What do you want down the line? If you want to be a faculty member, you got to go to grad school at some point, but you don't have to go now. Follow your passion. Do what you think that you want to do. Let your light shine. We all have gifts in our lives that can manifest in different ways. And I feel like if you follow those passions, those gifts that you've been given, eventually good things will happen, and just do hard things.
Well, fantastic note to end on, Tyler. If our listeners want to learn more about you and some of the things we talked about today, what is the best way for them to learn more?
Best way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. I think that's great. And if you just send me a message saying that you listen to the story, that's a good way for me to filter people that are selling me things, which I'm sure we all got. And then the best way to connect to the work or learning about the variable friction stuff is through our website at cadence.com. That's CADENSE.com.
Excellent. Well, listeners, definitely take a moment to get connected with Tyler on LinkedIn. Check out the Cadence website. And Tyler, thank you again so much for joining us on the show today.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here.
It's been wonderful to chat with you. And listeners, thank you again for being here with us as well. We hope you'll join us for our next episode of People Behind the Science.